You are standing at the edge of an empty desert. Nothing here but heat, dust, and a man making a promise to God. Not a small oath, not a diplomatic formality. He swore to the sun, to the only God he believed in front of his court and his family and his children, that this city would never be abandoned, that he would never leave it, that even if God himself commanded him to build somewhere else, he would refuse. He called it Paradise. The city held 50,000 people. It was one of the most populated places in the ancient world. It was abandoned within a decade of his death. And then someone tore it apart, stone by stone, block by block. Not abandoned, unmade, with a thoroughness so complete that for 3,000 years nobody knew it had ever existed. What happened inside that city is one of the darkest stories in all of ancient Egypt. Akhenaten, Egypt's most radical pharaoh, the man who banned every god but one, built this city as a monument to his vision. If you've watched the Akhenaten video in this series, you already know how far it went. Banned every Egyptian god, built a new religion around the sun disk, collapsed the economy, ignored his empire while it burned. But here's the part of the story we didn't have room for. The city itself. What it cost to build. What happened to the people inside it. And what was done to erase it after he was gone. Because Amarna, Akhenaten's paradise, wasn't just politically radical. It was, for the people who built it and lived in it, a catastrophe. And the proof is in their bones. To understand what those bones tell us, you first need to understand the impossible timeline Akhenaten set for his architects. Because the speed at which he demanded this city be built is what killed people. The year is approximately 1346 BC. Akhenaten is in his 5th year of reign. He has chosen a stretch of virgin desert on the east bank of the Nile, uninhabited, untouched, belonging to no god and no old memory. And he has declared that here, in the dust, his new world begins. He calls it Akhenaten, the horizon of the Aten. He wants palaces, temples without roofs, open to the sky, to the sun. A royal road wide enough for chariot processions, an entire administrative capital, tombs carved into the cliffs above, a workers' village. He wants it now. Workers, artisans, priests, officials, entire communities were relocated from Thebes and Memphis to this new city in the desert. Conscripted, moved by order of the pharaoh, who had recently made himself the exclusive intermediary between humanity and God. You did not refuse. Within 4 years, Akhenaten had between 20 and 50,000 inhabitants. None of them chose to be there. Archaeologists have been excavating the cemeteries of Amarna for 40 years. What they have found in those graves has changed how we understand the city completely. Over 90% of skeletons from the workers' cemetery show evidence of severe, chronic physical labor. Not the ordinary markers of a working life, extreme markers, spinal compression fractures, spondylolysis, a specific fracture of the vertebral arch caused by repetitive load-bearing, at rates 2 to 4 times higher than in comparative populations elsewhere in Egypt. Shattered hip joints, destroyed knees, repetitive stress fractures in the arms and legs. The average age of death was low. Infant mortality was high. Malnutrition markers in childhood bone development appear across almost the entire population. And then the children. In the South Tomb Cemetery, the burial site used by laborers, archaeologists found juvenile skeletons with the same stress markers as adults. Children with bone damage consistent with heavy physical work, beginning before their growth plates had closed. Akhenaten's paradise was being built on the backs of children. And here is the reason it was this bad. It wasn't just that the work was hard, it was the speed. Akhenaten wanted a civilization in 5 years. What that compression did to human bodies was irreversible. But it gets worse, because of what happened when he died. Around year 17 of his reign, Akhenaten disappears from the records, probably dead, possibly from the epidemic that had been ravaging the ancient Near East, a plague documented in desperate diplomatic letters from foreign kings, describing entire cities going silent. His tomb, carved into the cliffs above his city, was prepared for a god-king. His body was placed inside. And then, within 3 years, the city emptied. Tutankhamun moved the courts to Memphis, then Thebes. The priests of Amarna returned to their temples, with 40 years of rage stored up and the full apparatus of the Egyptian state at their disposal. Amarna began to drain. The officials left first, then the merchants, then the workers who had no reason to stay. The city Akhenaten swore would last forever became, within a decade, a collection of empty buildings slowly filling with sand. But the priests weren't just reclaiming their temples. They were planning something that had never been done to a city in Egyptian history. Not conquest, not fire. Something far more methodical and far more deliberate. And then Horemheb arrived. What Horemheb did to Amarna is not something Egypt did to enemy cities. It's something you do to an idea you're terrified might survive. Horemheb sent demolition teams. Not to burn the city, not to smash it wholesale. To dismantle it, carefully, systematically, block by block. The limestone temples were taken apart one stone at a time. Each block, called a talatat, approximately the size of a brick, many still bearing painted figures and hieroglyphs from Amarna's walls, was transported to construction sites across Egypt, used as fill, packed inside the cores of new pylons and temple foundations dedicated to Amarna. If you dig into the walls of Karnak today, you find them. Tens of thousands of talatat blocks hidden inside the bones of Amarna's most sacred monuments. Akhenaten city became the hidden foundation of his enemies' temples. He was erased by being used as building material. But the cliffs above the city were harder to destroy. The tombs carved into solid rock couldn't be dismantled and carried away. And in those tombs, sealed, intact, untouched for 3,000 years, the scenes of Amarna life were preserved. Not royal propaganda, ordinary life. Bakeries, wine presses, markets, Nefertiti overseeing tribute from foreign nations, Akhenaten with his daughters under the rays of the sun. A family, the most human portrayal of a royal family in all of Egyptian art, rendered in paint that survived every attempt to erase what they represented. The erasure worked everywhere they could reach, and failed everywhere they couldn't. But there is one thing at Amarna that even the archaeologists who know this site best have never been able to explain. And it was found in the north of the city, in the final years of its occupation. A mass burial. Hundreds of bodies in shallow graves, little or no grave goods, no ceremony, some showing signs of trauma. Buried quickly, without the rituals ancient Egyptians believed were necessary for the soul to survive death. This is not the workers' cemetery, that's somewhere else. This is something that happened at the end, in the final years of Amarna's existence, when the city was dying and whatever peace it had maintained was fracturing. Who were they? We don't know. How did they die? We don't know. Were they the last inhabitants who had nowhere else to go? Were they people caught up in whatever violence accompanied the city's final days? Were they connected to the dismantling itself? Workers brought in to demolish the city, who then couldn't leave. The city kept this secret. Like everything about Amarna, it offers a question and removes the answer. Here is what Amarna comes down to. Akhenaten swore his city would stand forever. He was so certain, so locked into his own vision of paradise, that he built an oath into the founding documents of the place. Never abandon it, never expand beyond it, never let it be anything other than what it was the day it was built. It lasted less than 20 years. It was demolished within a generation. It was hidden inside other people's monuments. For 3,000 years, it was a gap in the king's list, a missing name, a story that had been so thoroughly unmade that historians were rebuilding it from talatat blocks found in Karnak's walls. But here's the thing about the oath. He swore it to God, in the open desert, in front of every person who mattered in his world. And then the world ended, and Horemheb came. And here is what survived in the end. Not the palaces, not the temples, not the administrative buildings or the royal road or the grand procession routes. The tombs in the cliffs, the ones that were too hard to demolish. In those tombs, the daughters run and play, the family sits at dinner. The artists captured something in the Amarna period that Egyptian art had never allowed before and would never allow again. The pharaoh as a human being, fallible, present, holding his child. Horemheb could erase the city, he could erase the name, he could pack the stones into Karnak and pretend it never happened. He couldn't erase the art. 3,000 years later, we are still looking at it. Here's the question. Do you think Akhenaten knew what he was building, really? Not the theology, the human cost, the children with broken spines, the mass graves at the edge of the city. Was this paradise, or was this something else dressed up in the language of paradise? Drop it below. And next, we go somewhere that makes even Amarna look like a good outcome. The moment Egypt stopped being Egypt, the last native pharaoh, the end of everything.